when a 52-year-old black woman stepped in to defend a white biker from aggressive cops behind her diner. She didn't expect it to make headlines, let alone bring 200 bikers from across the South to her doorstep the very next morning. Clarice Monroe didn't plan to get involved. She had pies in the oven, invoices on the counter, and a short fuse after a night of no sleep. But when she heard the shouting out back, she tossed her dish towel on the prep table and marched toward the screen door like a woman who'd had enough. Of everything. It was near closing time at Monroe's Grill, a small roadside diner sitting off Highway 78 just outside of Watkinsville, Georgia. Clarice had run it solo for over 2 decades. 52, sharp-tongued and proud of her biscuits, she didn't put up with foolishness. Not from drunk customers, not from suppliers who shorted her on grits, and certainly not from uniformed men flexing their authority. She pushed the back door open and stepped into the sticky air. 3 patrol cars were parked crooked behind the building, lights spinning. 2 deputies stood inches from Reed Callahan, a white man in his 60s with a grey beard, sun-beaten skin, and a weathered leather vest with an Iron Grove rider's patch sewn on the back. Reed wasn't shouting. He wasn't even moving. He had one hand resting on the dented tailgate of his pickup, the other at his side, calm. But the way the younger cop jabbed his finger toward Reed's chest made something twist in Clarice's gut. "Y'all need to back off," she said loud enough to cut through everything. The officers turned. One of them, Deputy Sloan, a man known for his temper and love of minor power trips, sneered. "Ma'am, this doesn't concern you." "It does when you're harassing a man who was helping me 30 minutes ago." She walked closer. "Reed's been fixing the busted fryer line since 5. I asked him to." "You asked him to?" Sloan repeated, eyebrows raised like she'd confessed to robbing a bank. "Yes," Clarice snapped. "Because I couldn't get anyone else out this late. He pulled a rag from his truck, crawled under that pipe, and stopped the leak before I lost half the kitchen." The other officer, younger and uncertain, looked at Sloan, then back to Reed, then down at his boots. "Ma'am, we got a report of suspicious activity. Someone said he was scoping out the place." "Someone was wrong." Clarice folded her arms. "And instead of asking me, the owner, you're out here trying to escalate a man doing me a favor." There was a pause. Then, from inside the diner, the sound of a phone camera clicking. Mr. Jeffries, a retired math teacher who came in for catfish every Thursday, was standing near the back window, recording quietly. He didn't say a word. Didn't have to. Reed hadn't spoken once. But then he did. "You all right, Clarice?" "I'm all right," she replied, still glaring at Sloan. "Then I'm good too." The older officer shifted his stance, clearly uncomfortable now. Sloan muttered something under his breath and walked off. The younger one followed. The patrol cars pulled out without sirens, but the tension lingered like grease smoke. Clarice turned back toward the door. "Reed, don't leave yet. I still owe you a plate." He nodded silently and leaned against his truck. Inside, Mr. Jeffries slid his phone back into his pocket. "You all right, Miss Monroe?" "I'm tired," she said, pouring herself a glass of sweet tea. "But yeah, I'm all right." She didn't know the video would end up online. Didn't know that someone across the country would repost it. Didn't know it would be clipped, shared, and passed around like some kind of gospel. She went home, put on her satin bonnet, and fell asleep with her TV still on. But the next morning, Clarice would wake up to a sound she hadn't heard since her daddy's funeral. Hundreds of rumbling engines coming from the road. Clarice didn't notice anything unusual when she unlocked the front door the next morning. The sun was just rising over the pine trees, casting a low orange stripe across the gravel lot. It was quiet. Almost too quiet for a Friday. No truckers yet. No old-timers with travel mugs. Just the buzz of insects and the sharp chirp of her security alarm when she keyed it off. She moved through the usual steps. Lights on, chairs down, bacon started, fryer rechecked. The line Reed fixed was still holding strong. She thought about leaving a thank you note in his truck's window if he came by again. But her thoughts were broken when she looked at her phone. 12 missed calls, 6 text messages, 3 voicemails. She frowned. Her cousin in Texas had messaged her. "Girl, is this you in this video?" Then a link. Clarice tapped it. It was a Facebook post from a motorcycle club in Alabama. The video was only 37 seconds long, but it captured the exact moment she had stepped between Reed and the officers. Her voice was clear. Her posture was firm. Her words, "He was helping me. Back off," had been replayed thousands of times. The caption read, "Black woman stands up for our brother. Respect." She didn't know whether to be shocked, angry, or amused. She watched it again, this time noticing the way Reed looked at her. Not surprised, just calm, steady, like he was used to being defended, but not in that way. The post had over 42,000 shares. Clarice put the phone down and went back to flipping bacon. She figured it would blow over in a day or two, but by 8:15, she heard it. A low roar, then another, then 10 more. She walked to the window and saw them coming. Motorcycles. Dozens? No, not dozens, more than that. Long rows stretching back to the curve near the old tire shop. Black helmets, chrome tanks, leather vests, flags stitched to the backs. Some had club names she didn't recognize. South Iron Circle, Brothers of the River, Dust County Knights. They weren't just from Georgia. The license plates told her they'd come from Mississippi, Alabama, even as far as Arkansas. Clarice stared out at them, frozen. She didn't know what was happening, but her gut told her it had to do with that video. The first few parked directly in front of the diner, taking care not to block the driveway. One of them, a tall white woman with silver braids and arms like tree trunks, got off her bike and walked straight to the door. Clarice opened it before the woman knocked. "You Clarice?" she asked. "I am. I'm Dina. Iron Grove Riders, Reed's family. We saw the video. We just came by to eat. Hope that's all right." Clarice blinked. "You hungry? We rode since 3 this morning. I could eat a cow and a half." "Well then," Clarice said, stepping aside. "You'd better come in before you fall over." Dina chuckled and waved to the others. More bikers poured in. Not all at once. They were respectful about it. They came in small groups, took seats, ordered quietly. Some didn't eat right away. They just shook Clarice's hand and said thank you. One even brought flowers. A few pulled out wads of cash and paid double for breakfast. She had to call in her niece and her neighbor to help run the grill. By 10, there were over 120 motorcycles in the parking lot. Locals started pulling in just to see what was happening. Some stayed, some turned around. But the diner didn't empty once. And still, more riders came. Clarice moved like she was in a trance, pouring coffee, flipping omelets, wiping counters. But every now and then she'd stop to look out the window and whisper, "What is happening?" Inside the diner, the energy was peaceful. No loud engines, no rowdy talk, just people. Eating, talking, thanking her. Bikers of every background, black, white, Latino, even a few older Asian men in windbreakers, sharing space like it was the most normal thing in the world. And just before noon, Reed walked in. He didn't say much at first, just tipped his head and said, "Morning, Clarice." "Morning, Reed. I think you brought friends?" He smirked. "Didn't plan to. Word got out. They came on their own." She looked around at the full tables and the smell of eggs and bacon hanging in the air. "I don't even know what to say." "Then don't," Reed replied. "You already said it yesterday." But not everyone watching from town thought this crowd was a good thing, and by the next morning, someone was already dialing the sheriff. Saturday morning came faster than Clarice expected. Her feet were still aching from Friday's wave of customers. She'd only managed a few hours of sleep, but it didn't matter. She was up before dawn, sliding on her old sneakers and rubbing the crick in her neck. The coffee pot was half full by 5:45. Her niece Serena had offered to open, but Clarice insisted. This was her place. And whatever this strange new storm was, she wanted to face it herself. By 6:30, the parking lot was already rumbling again. The early risers had returned. A couple dozen bikes rolled in just as the sun split the trees. This time, They brought donuts from somewhere 2 towns over and handed them to Clarice like they were peace offerings. She thanked them with a tired grin and poured the first pots of coffee. Dina showed up before 7 with a crate of fresh peaches and a pair of gloves. "Figured you might want to do something special with these," she said, dropping the box onto the counter. "I used to cook for a living. Can I help?" Clarice didn't answer at first. She stared at the woman's gloves, leather palms, worn thin at the seams, and nodded slowly. "Yeah, I could use an extra hand on the prep line." That's when she realized something had shifted. These people weren't just passing through. They weren't here for a photo, or a headline, or to stir trouble. They came because something about that video hit them. And maybe, more than that, because Clarice had stood up without checking who she was standing up for. There was no press, no interviews, no hand-painted signs, just presence. And then came the flood. By 9 a.m., the second wave began to arrive. Some came in formation, 20 or 30 bikes at a time. Others came in pairs or alone. One old man on a gold Honda trike pulled up and told Clarice he'd ridden 5 hours from Gadsden and only stopped once, to pee and stretch. She laughed and handed him a water. By noon, the lot looked like a festival. Bikes lined up along the road's shoulder, parked carefully around the diner, even backed into the lot of the abandoned bait shop next door. Some folks brought lawn chairs, a few had started playing cards on overturned crates. Someone strung up a makeshift banner from their trailer. "We ride with Clarice." She didn't know how to respond to that. Inside it was chaos in the best possible way. Orders flying in, pancakes stacking tall, the register drawer clanking like a slot machine. But nobody was complaining. The bikers took turns, bussed their own tables, held the door open for older customers. It was more orderly than most Sundays after church. And for the first time in years, Clarice's smile wasn't guarded. It just happened. By early afternoon, the weather started to shift. Heavy clouds gathered low over the trees, thick and moody. Rain was coming, but no one left. Instead, Reed came back. He wasn't riding today. He pulled up in a dented blue truck and parked right near the front. Clarice stepped outside as he got out. "I figured I'd see you again," she said. "I figured I owed you lunch. You think this place needs more customers today?" He chuckled. "Not really. Just figured I'd eat with the right crowd." They sat together at a booth near the window. Serena brought them plates of fried catfish and collard greens. Neither of them said much at first. Just ate, listened, watched. Then Reed spoke. "You didn't know me, didn't know my club, and you still stepped in." Clarice glanced at him, then back at her plate. "Didn't need to. I know what it looks like when someone's being treated wrong, and I've had that look turned on me before." "Yeah," Reed said, his voice soft. "I figured." Their eyes met. Not with sentimentality, but understanding. They were from different places, different lives, different pasts. But in that moment, it didn't matter. Before they could finish, Serena rushed over. "A group of guys just pulled up in sheriff's department jackets," she whispered. "They're talking to the folks parked near the edge of the lot." Clarice sighed. Well, I guess the peace didn't last forever. But the trouble waiting outside wasn't coming from the bikers. It was coming from people who weren't ready to see her diner turn into a gathering place for strangers they didn't understand. Clarice wiped her hands on her apron and walked outside. The officers were easy to spot, 3 of them in khaki shirts and heavy boots standing near the property line. They weren't loud, but their body language said plenty. One had his arms crossed, lips tight. Another was pacing slowly near the bikes parked along the edge. And the third? Clarice knew him. Deputy Rick Hanley. She hadn't seen him since her mother's funeral, 7 years back. He'd come with his wife and brought a peach cobbler. She remembered thinking it was kind of him, even if he hadn't said a single word that day. Now he was back, hands resting on his utility belt, watching the gathering like it was a threat instead of a thank you. "Morning, Rick," she called out. He turned slowly. "Clarice, you here to eat or measure the shadows off my property line?" A small smirk played on his lips, but it faded quickly. Lot of traffic today. Seems so. Some folks are worried. This isn't normal for a quiet place like this. She looked over her shoulder at the diners, the folding chairs, the borrowed tents someone had set up to cover extra tables. Didn't feel very quiet when Sloane tried to push Reed around out back the other day, she replied. Nobody seemed worried about that. Rick didn't respond right away. Then he muttered, "You should have let that go, Clarice. That kind of thing blows over if you don't pour gas on it." She stepped closer, her voice low and calm. "Rick, I've been pouring coffee and flipping pancakes on this corner for 23 years. Never once had to pour gas on anything. That fire out back? That wasn't mine, and I sure as hell wasn't going to stand by and watch it burn someone else." He looked tired. Or maybe just cornered. "We've got to answer calls when they come in. People are saying it's becoming a scene. There's pressure from higher up." Clarice nodded slowly. "Let me guess. Someone's afraid all these bikers are going to lower the property values. Or worse, buy lunch from a black woman." Rick flinched a little. "That's not what this is." "No," she said, stepping back. "It never is. Until it is." She turned and walked back inside without waiting for another word. The mood inside the diner was lighter. Dina had started telling stories from her trucking days, drawing laughs from two brothers in matching vests. One of the younger bikers, Nico, from somewhere near Biloxi, was showing Serena how to make quick corn fritters from pancake batter. Someone was fixing the jukebox in the corner. Reed was still sitting by the window, sipping sweet tea and watching it all like it was a movie he'd forgotten he liked. Clarice moved through the crowd, topping off mugs and sneaking small smiles. She overheard snippets of conversation. "Didn't think I'd cry over eggs and grits, but here I am. Never met folks like this. We've been riding for decades, and nobody ever said thank you like this woman. This place feels different, feels honest." The moment felt heavy and light all at once. Like something was being stitched together without anyone saying so. Not just between the bikers and Clarice, but between strangers who saw her action as more than just defense. They saw it as something rare. Right. Later that afternoon, Reed helped Clarice haul a busted fridge out to the back. It had been dead for a week, and she hadn't had time to get it replaced. He lifted one side, she grabbed the other. As they set it down by the alley, he wiped his brow. "You ever think something like this could happen? All this?" Clarice stared at the sky. "I think we live in a country where everyone's waiting to see if anyone's brave enough to go first. I didn't plan to be brave. I just got tired of pretending like I didn't see what was happening." Reed gave a slow nod. "We need more tired people like you." They stood there for a moment. No words, just the sound of laughter spilling out from the diner window and the low rhythm of a blues ong someone had finally coaxed from the jukebox. But just as the tension seemed to settle, the county sheriff placed a call that would threaten to undo everything Clarice had built in the last 48 hours. The call came just after sunset. Clarice had just finished scrubbing down the last booth when Serena walked in, holding her cell phone out like it was a bad omen. "It's the sheriff," she said, whispering as if the man could hear her through the line. Clarice didn't flinch. She wiped her hands, took the phone, and stepped outside. "Monroe speaking." Sheriff Dalton McRae's voice came through slow and deliberate. "Evening, Clarice. I figured I'd reach out before this gets bigger than it already is." She waited, not bothering with pleasantries. "I'm going to put it plain," he continued. "I've got county commissioners breathing down my neck. Your parking lot looks like Sturgis out there. People are calling. Businesses are worried. Some even mentioned bringing in the state boys." Clarice raised an eyebrow, though no one could see it. "And what exactly do they think I'm doing wrong?" she asked, calm and flat. "Well," McRae said, choosing his words like someone trying not to slip on gravel, "they think you're encouraging unrest, encouraging folks to gather." Clarice laughed once through her nose. "It's a diner, Dalton. I serve coffee and cornbread. Since when is that a threat?" He sighed. "You know how this town is. People don't like change. Especially not change that draws this much attention." "No, Dalton. They don't like attention when it shines on their behavior," she replied. There's been folks coming to my place for 20 years. Ain't never had a problem until the customers started wearing leather and carrying respect instead of church hats and casserole dishes. There was a pause on the line. Then, I'm asking you nicely, Clarice. Shut it down for a few days. Let this blow over. Clarice's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. You're asking me to stop serving food to peaceful people who drove hours just to say thank you? To tell them to go home and pretend none of this happened? I'm asking you to help ease tensions. Funny, she said. You didn't say a word when your deputy was flaring those tensions out back, but now you want me to be the one to cool it off. Another pause. I'm trying to keep this from becoming something ugly. It already is, she said. You just don't want it showing up on someone else's camera. She ended the call before he could answer and handed the phone back to Serena. Inside, the noise was mellowing. Most of the day's guests had headed back to their hotels or tents. A few stayed behind, helping stack chairs or mop the floors. Reed was still at the counter, scribbling something in a notebook. When Clarice walked in, he looked up and knew something had shifted. You all right? He asked. She nodded once. They want me to close. For how long? Long enough for things to settle, Reed smirked. That's what they call it now? Clarice pulled off her apron and leaned against the counter. I'm not backing down, not from this. You sure? He asked. Because when they can't scare you with laws, they'll try to scare you with loneliness. They'll wait for the crowd to thin. Then they'll come. Clarice didn't blink. Let them. For the first time since the video surfaced, the smile she gave Reed was tired. But behind it, there was something steel-hard. A woman who'd seen storms come and go and knew which ones were worth standing through. Outside, the rain finally came. Slow at first, then steady. Some bikers took shelter under the gas station canopy across the road. Others pulled on ponchos, unfazed. Inside the diner, Clarice turned the lights down low. A few stayed behind, playing cards in the corner. Reed poured her a cup of decaf without asking. She looked out the window as the rain streaked the glass. They don't want people like me and people like you sitting at the same table. That's why this matters. Reed nodded slowly. Then maybe tomorrow, we bring in a few more chairs. But Clarice knew this wasn't just about coffee and kindness anymore. The next move could either shatter the momentum or cement it. Clarice arrived at the diner just before 6 a.m. The rain had stopped overnight, but the air was thick with the kind of heat that promised another storm by evening. The parking lot was slick, puddles reflecting the overhead power lines like bent metal wires. But the lot wasn't empty. 4 motorcycles sat parked, their chrome gleaming in the morning haze. Dina was on the porch with a mug in hand. She nodded to Clarice. No words yet. Just presence. Inside, Serena was already setting out biscuits. A fresh pot of coffee bubbled behind the counter. The radio played something old and slow. Clarice moved to the window and glanced out again. They hadn't left. Some had pitched tents nearby. Others had camped out in their vans or under the tin roof of the auto shop across the road. This crowd wasn't a wave anymore. It was an anchor, and Clarice knew that wasn't going to sit well with the people calling the sheriff. Reed walked in 20 minutes later. He looked different. Same clothes, same boots, but something in his posture had changed. Less relaxed, like he was ready for something. They're serious now, he said, sliding into a booth. I figured. They called my house this morning, he continued. Told me the club needed to clear out. Said there were safety concerns. Clarice leaned on the counter, arms crossed. They say what kind of safety? Reed shook his head. Just hinted. Said people are nervous. That there might be incidents. Never said anything straight. Just warnings wrapped in polite words. They don't want us to stay, Clarice said flatly. They're waiting for one wrong move. One loud voice. One busted tail light. She nodded. They're not getting it. More bikers filtered in over the next hour. Men and women. Young, old. One woman named Gloria had driven up from Mobile with a box of pecan pies. She'd never met Clarice, but said she'd watched the video at least 30 times. I saw a woman who didn't flinch, she said. I wanted to be near that kind of woman. By mid-morning, a makeshift table had been set up outside, with paper plates and gallon jugs of tea. Some bikers offered free oil changes to townsfolk, hoping to ease the tension. A few locals accepted. Others drove by slow, staring, unsure whether to honk or hide. Then came the white SUV. It pulled in too fast and stopped short, gravel spitting under the tires. 2 men stepped out, one in uniform, one in jeans. The one in jeans walked with the kind of arrogance Clarice recognized from decades of dealing with small men in big shoes. "Ma'am," he called out, walking up the porch. "You the owner?" Clarice stepped forward. "I am." He flipped out a badge. "State Fire Marshal's office. Got a report there might be some violations here. Overcrowding, electrical strain, possible health code issues." She narrowed her eyes. "You've been getting health code complaints since when? Yesterday?" He smiled like it was supposed to disarm her. "We're just here to make sure everything's safe. No one's trying to shut you down." Clarice stood still for a beat, then stepped aside. "You want to check the kitchen? Go ahead. Just wash your hands first. We run a clean house here." The man hesitated, then walked inside. Dina, standing nearby, muttered, "You think they'll make something up?" "Doesn't matter," Clarice replied. "We don't back down over inspections. We do what we always do. Keep working." The inspection took nearly 2 hours. They found nothing serious. A light fixture that needed tightening. A drawer that stuck. But no violations. No citations. Still, the message was clear. "We're watching you." When they left, Reed walked up to Clarice on the porch. "That was their warning shot." "Then we fire back the only way we know how," she said. "We stay open." He nodded. "You still want to feed all of us tomorrow?" "I want to feed everyone who believes in something better than silence." Reed smiled. "Not big. Just enough. I'll bring the grill trailer. We'll set up outside. We'll make it a meal they won't forget." And as Clarice looked out at the sea of strangers who now felt like her people, she made peace with something. If they wanted her to fold, they should have picked someone with a smaller backbone. Sunday came heavy and humid, the kind of air that clung to your skin before the sun even rose. Clarice stood on the back steps of the diner, a towel draped over her shoulder, watching Reed and 2 others set up the grill trailer they'd hauled in overnight. A few picnic tables had been donated from a nearby church. One biker strung cafe lights across a row of wooden poles like he'd done it 100 times before. It wasn't just bikers anymore. Word had spread. Local families started showing up, first out of curiosity, then out of something else. Maybe it was the smell of smoked ribs and cornbread in the air. Maybe it was how organized everything looked. How calm. No shouting. No circling cops. Just food, folding chairs, and conversations floating between strangers who had nothing in common until now. Clarice watched a mother in a red tank top sit beside a burly biker in a sleeveless leather vest. Their kids were both holding paper cups of lemonade and laughing at something. It wasn't a planned photo op. It wasn't a peace rally. It was a potluck. Inside, the diner was running light. Only 2 servers on the floor. But the porch, the parking lot, and the grassy patch next door had taken on a life of their own. Reed manned the grill like a man on a mission. Dina was coordinating the food table like a general. Gloria, Ms. Pecan Pie, had somehow become the unofficial host, greeting folks with a smile and stories from her long-haul days. Clarice walked table to table, shook hands, hugged a few necks, said thank you more times than she could count. At one point, Mr. Jeffries from 2 booths over, the same man who'd quietly filmed the video, stood up on a milk crate and asked for everyone's attention. "I know a lot of y'all don't know each other," he said, "but I've lived in this town 56 years, and I've never seen anything like this. Never seen people show up for someone who didn't ask for a single thing." Clarice Monroe stood out back of this diner and told the truth in front of men with guns. All she said was, "He was helping me," and that was enough. And somehow that tiny piece of decency turned into this. So if you're here today, it's not by accident. The crowd didn't cheer. They didn't clap. They just nodded quietly, the way people do when something feels real. Later, a young man with shaggy hair and a camera slung over his shoulder approached Clarice. He said he was from Macon and writing a piece for an independent site. "Can I ask you a few questions?" he asked. "You already are," she said, sipping her tea. He smiled. "What do you want people to take away from all this?" Clarice thought for a moment, looked around, looked at Reed flipping meat, looked at Gloria talking someone's ear off about rest stops in Mississippi. Then she said, "I want them to stop waiting on permission to do the right thing. You see something wrong, fix it. You see somebody being mistreated, say something. Don't wait for a camera. Don't wait to be safe. Just be decent. That's all." He paused, then asked, "And what now?" She looked out toward the highway. "Now, we finish feeding people. Then I open back up tomorrow like I always do. This place doesn't run on attention. It runs on pancakes and coffee, and people knowing they've got a place to sit if they're tired." He thanked her and walked off. Clarice didn't follow him with her eyes. She just kept moving. There were plates to refill, chairs to fix, a little girl asking for more watermelon. As dusk rolled in, the cafe lights above the tables flickered on. The breeze finally broke the heat. Laughter drifted under the trees. Reed walked over and handed her a plate. "We might have started a tradition, you know?" Clarice looked at the plate, then at him. "I'm not hosting this every week." He grinned. "Once a year?" "We'll see," she said. "Ask me when my feet stop hurting." But in her heart, she knew something had shifted. The diner was still hers. The town was still the same in a lot of ways. But something bigger had cracked open, like a window in a room too long sealed shut. People hadn't just shown up for food. They'd shown up because someone had to go first. And maybe that's the only real way to change things. One person showing up, then another and another, until no one feels brave. Just human. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe for more powerful, human-centered stories that remind us what courage, kindness, and connection really look like.